Welcome to The Human Element, presented by Whisk. I'm your host, Barb Biden, and in each episode, I sit down with CHROs and senior HR leaders to explore how AI, innovation, and human insight are reshaping the future of HR. We'll explore how technology is reshaping leadership, strategy, and the role of HR by sharing candid stories, practical ideas, and strategic perspectives to help you shape the future. The Human Element is brought to you by Whisk, the leader in agentic HR and creator of Harper, the world's first AI HR generalist. Learn how Harper can resolve up to 80% of routine HR tasks autonomously. Learn more about Whisk at whisk.com. Welcome to The Human Element. Today I am joined by Christy Harris, who is the SVP and Chief Human Resources Officer at CCC Intelligent Solutions. CCC is an AI-powered SaaS platform, and Christy is doing no small feat here, leading people strategy for a company that truly is in the middle of a transformation of embedding AI into just an entire industry's infrastructure while simultaneously transforming how its own workforce operates. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Christy. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Barb. It's good. And it's Friday, so it's great day.
Even better.
Great day to have a conversation.
Even better. So let's start with something that probably most people outside of your industry don't know. CCC has been around for 45 years, has crossed over $1 billion in revenue. Can you tell us more about the problem that the company is actually solving and what's so important about that right now?
Yeah. At the simplest level, we help people move forward after an accident faster with less friction and more clarity. I know most people probably don't realize this, Barb, but 50,000 people have an accident every day, and that's unfortunate. But the one thing that we don't often talk about is for sure it's an inconvenience, but there is several human moments related to an accident. It's stressful, it's emotional, it's expensive, and CCC sits in the middle of that ecosystem between insurers, repair shops, carriers, and data providers. And we use AI, data, and workflow automation to help those moments resolve more quickly and fairly. And then you might ask, why is that important at this time? And it's because the system is really under strain. I am sure you and I, like many Americans, saw an increase in their premiums, and a lot of people saw their auto insurance go up by 50%. Total loss rates are higher. That's because the entry to buying a car is much more expensive, like $50,000 or more.
Yeah.
And claims are more complex. So consumers are feeling the pressure. And if we don't modernize that, then the experience isn't going to feel good for anyone.
Totally. And CCC is playing a huge role in the modernization, like right in the middle of that industry, right, from a product standpoint. And you're also trying to drive AI adoption within your workforce. Are those two things ever in competition, right? What you need to do for the product and what you're trying to drive for your workforce, or are they more harmonious?
Yeah, I don't think we think about it as an either or situation. If the product is advancing faster than the workforce can absorb it, then that doesn't scale. And if the workforce is changing without a clear product imperative, that's not going to work either. It can create burnout, but obviously you'll fall flat with consumers if that isn't what the industry needs. So for us, like the tiebreaker really goes back to what helps the consumer move forward faster. And that keeps those decisions grounded, even when the trade-offs are hard.
That makes sense. And you've shared one of the ways that you frame this up in your strategic pillars, one of those being AI everywhere. So it's, again, not just in the product, but it truly is in every internal workflow and building that in. That's like a big ask, right, of a workforce. How do you do that without people feeling like the ground is constantly shifting beneath them?
I think one of the things is that you have to acknowledge that there is some fear and uncertainty, pretending that it doesn't exist and that the world is not changing any faster yesterday than it's going to move faster today. I think sometimes you got to acknowledge it, but we really try to anchor it. It's not that we can promise certainty because we can't, but for us, that anchor is purpose. And so we help people move forward after unexpected events. And that when work changes or tool changes or roles evolve, we constantly reconnect it back to the why, like why this matters. I'm sure many people that are listening to this call probably know Simon Sinek talked about this years ago and going back to the why. But practicality, like in a practical terms, AI everywhere doesn't mean everyone becomes a data scientist. It means that embedded gets embedded in how work gets done. Drafting, analyzing, prioritizing, so people can spend more time on judgment, relationships, and outcomes.
And speaking of your purpose, you talked about the role that CCC plays at being helping people to move faster after an accident. And I think like you can see where AI's ability to create some speed and efficiency in processes, see where those are synergistic. But when you're asking people to fundamentally change how they work, how are you as an HR leader, like pulling them back to that purpose of what you're doing for humans who are getting in accidents and making that their anchor?
I wish you could say this is brain surgery or something, but like super advanced. But I think it goes back to just some common things around change management. First of all, you have to enroll people into the change. You have to communicate and communicate. And even when you think you've communicated, you have to communicate more. I think you have to find open forums, Barb, for people to be able to ask questions. And that goes back to cultural norms, like how safe is your environment to raise like issues or things that are not making sense, or to point out some of the things that you might have forgotten. But when we talk about purpose, we bring it up in every meeting and we lead with that. Now, some of the things we're doing is like we start every meeting with somebody talking about a purpose story. Like when I talked about 50,000 people having a car accident every day, doesn't really take much for you to know somebody who has just been in an accident and how that's affected people. And the interesting thing about an accident is it's very vivid. And in some cases, it's the thing people remember most clearly. And then when you've done something to help that person get back to whatever the new stage of normal is, that's pretty
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, what you're talking about, right, is just honestly storytelling within your organization, right? And keeping your customer stories very real and vivid in that same way almost, right? As I'm guessing what that is. It's like your team seeing those human moments that customers are experiencing when CCC's product, right, or technology is involved in helping them get through the aftermath of an accident, get their car repaired and so forth, it's anchoring, and people will find their own meaning in that. Sort of it engages them more deeply in their work, which then helps them to be more resilient to change, I would think. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, all of that I agree with, Barb. And I think we all know the impact of storytelling is very powerful. And it is harder, like as a B2B company, to think about the end user of this because we are almost behind the scenes with the actual company that they bought something, in this case, like a policy, and or went to a repair shop and got their car fixed or bought parts for their car. But we have to go back to, and that's why it's so important to anchor on the purpose and talk about those stories so people can see the connection. And I also don't want to de-emphasize the importance of role modeling, particularly by leadership. Obviously, this is one thing that can be both leader led and ground roots upward to be able to help it come to life in everyday interactions.
Yeah. And so the moving forward faster piece, because you're helping people move forward faster after an accident, does the move forward faster come up in other ways in terms of like leadership modeling in the company, in terms of encouraging pace and so forth?
Yeah, but I think pace has got to be a conversation, not just in our industry, but almost in every industry.
Every industry.
And I know I referenced this earlier, but I think the one thing that we talk a lot about is technology is changing every day faster, and it's never going to be slower than what it is today. And so that requires all of us to act with pace. And I don't mean recklessly, but you do not have the luxury of spending years being very methodical to think through what it is you need, because somebody's going to move faster than you. And you don't want to be the stories of the Fortune 100 companies, and every 10 years you look and there's very little of the same companies. And so I think you always have to have a challenger mindset, always thinking about the future, always innovating. And one of the things that someone taught me is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And so you keep thinking about that problem that you're trying to address. And when you look at problems, you'll find more problems, but you really do need to keep your eyes on the ball and where the opportunity is.
That is definitely going to be a takeaway. The fall in love with the problem, not the solution. It's a powerful reframe. You also brought up the concept of essentially leading from the top, right? Like it starts with leadership. What is one leadership behavior that if leaders are not doing it, transformation won't stick?
I know I keep going back to the purpose, but I think you need to know the why. I also believe that leaders also need to have learning agility and curiosity, because leadership, the way you lead today, is not the same for how we led 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's certainly not going to be the way we're going to lead in the future. The thing that I think that just continues to blow my mind, Barb, that I'm still wrapping my head around is this concept of leadership in an AI world where you are going to have people leaders who lead both humans and AI workers. And I don't even think we always do leadership right today, particularly management and some of the pressures. And so how are we going to prepare the next generation of people leaders to be able to lead both human beings and AI workers? Because even today, they are embedding AI workers in org charts and expecting leaders to be able to give feedback to those, because that's how AI gets better, is it's constant feedback. And we tend to think it's through keystrokes and prompts to get people, but it is how the leader is going to give feedback to keep honing in their skill and effectiveness.
Yeah, so I love it, Christy, when someone brings up a topic that we have not touched in 2 seasons of the podcast. And we have not talked about actually the leadership behaviors that a leader will need to lead both human workers and agents in the future. And then you brought up feedback, and I'm curious, it's an early answer, obviously, but how are leaders doing with providing feedback to agents, do you think? I know how I think that sometimes they're doing with giving feedback to humans, but are they doing better with agents, worse? What do you think?
I think that people think they're probably giving feedback better. And I don't know, this is a hypothesis because
Right, totally, yeah.
But if you think about how brave people are online and in how they correspond, which is differently behind a screen than they do when they have to interact with a human and have direct conversation, I am guessing in the nature of having to continue to refine your prompts to get really clear on what your answer is, that is what feedback is to an AI worker. But it also has to think about how they give feedback to the AI worker and how they work with people in their team and how they work across. And I'm not sure that we've figured out hey, AI worker, could you be a little less abrupt when you're clarifying your questions? It is something that we're going to have to think through. And then I'm not exactly sure what happens when 2 AI workers have a conflict. We'll have to figure out.
I haven't run into that one either. Where my head was going a little bit too was I feel like leaders who may be sensitive to giving clear human feedback to humans can really maybe see how their feedback, when they're giving an agent feedback, how that is highly corrective in changing the behavior of the agent, right? And then having the agent's performance improve. And For a leader, I just like when you said what you said a few minutes ago, it made me think that was really powerful for a leader to see an illustration around how clarity of feedback improves performance, which we tell them as HR professionals all the time. Sometimes they don't always deliver the feedback that is developmental or corrective, but I'm actually thinking about when they can see that feedback loop with an agent, is there any benefit to that helping them be even better, clearer leaders with the humans that they lead? I don't know. That's a bit of a nebulous comment, but hop
No,
in.
I like that concept, and I think you're onto something. The other thing, as you were just talking, it made me also think about AI could also help leaders coach humans in the moment, which is as it's observing your behavior or the things that you are giving feedback on, especially when it's written, whether you're reading a deck or you're reading a white paper or you're editing a communication. It's like sometimes as leaders give feedback, but it's nebulous. And it's like, I'm trying to interpret what this individual is saying. AI could be coaching the leader in the moment, which is that's not really clear. That person's not going to be able to interpret that, really well. Can you describe that in better terms? And then I think you could use it also. Obviously, you're going to have to coach AI workers, but you could also use AI to be a better manager in how you are responding or providing feedback through your day-to-day interactions.
That was where I was going. Is the idea of having to provide instruction, feedback, and clarity to an agent going to teach us that sort of clarity? It's not rocket science, like you said. That sort of clarity, though, is helpful in other circumstances as well with the humans we work with. Gosh, this time is going by so fast. This is the last big question, I think, before we hop into the lightning round. So what is top of mind for you right now, Christy, as a CHRO?
Capacity. I just, not technically, but more emotionally around my capacity. And not just my capacity, but capacity of leaders. We're asking a lot of leaders right now. Grow the business, adopt new technology, care deeply for your teams, make good decisions, particularly in a time of ambiguity. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how we support leaders so that they don't burn out while they're moving fast and expected to move faster. And the thing we didn't touch on a couple minutes ago when we were talking about AI is I don't want to lose sight that people managers are still uniquely positioned because they are the connection to the teams that they lead. And I believe that's what is going to differentiate humans from the AI workers is all the things that we bring from just the human experience.
Totally. I see the capacity problem with leaders and with the teams they lead, right? There is just a lot going on and balancing that and helping us having as executive leaders realistic expectations around absorption of change and where to head first and that sort of thing is a balancing act that keeps me up at night, quite frankly, too. Going more personally for you and your workflow as an HR leader, if you could solve one thing for yourself right now, could include your team if you want, but for yourself, for us, not for the business, what would it be?
Oh, I had so many things that I was thinking about, but I think it's synthesizing information. My value is in the judgment, but not the aggregation of all the data. And so, one of the things that one of our technologies does is it helps adjusters or examiners determine what is the best next action that they need to take. And I would love somebody to say, Christy, here's where you're most uniquely positioned. Here's the next best thing you should focus on. Not tell me what to do, because this is where I think the human in the loop is, but give me the information saying out of all the competing priorities, here's where you could make the biggest impact today.
I will remember. I'm not saying I'm all the way there yet, but I'm trying to customize a sort of CHRO operating system, GPT, that I am happy to share because I know someone will make it much better than me. But I'm thinking about the same thing as like surfacing the right stuff at the right time and helping point me in the right direction in these little slivers of moments that we often find in our days. I love that. And I promise I will share what I've got. It's imperfect for sure, but maybe you can make it better and then share it back with me.
I'm happy to collaborate on this with you. I think the other thing, just from how sometimes, as you move up in the organization, you don't get as much feedback. And also, there's sometimes where there's something happening in the culture or the organization, and people expect you to know, but you don't because you're not in every meeting and you're not sitting in the halls. I'd love to be like fed that kind of information too. I think that would be very valuable.
Yeah, to just be able to get more of the nuanced pieces of things that are going on, like on your radar, would help with decision making, all of that, as
Right.
I'm guessing where you're going, right? Is if you feel like sometimes you need precise information about exactly what might be happening in an area of your world in order to make the best decision. And yes, as you get less feedback, the more senior you become, the less confident you can become that you know exactly what's happening there in order to make the best call. So I'm with you on that one. What do you think is one thing that separates HR leaders who will lead well through this period from the ones who won't?
I think it's about those that are willing to get off the sidelines. I think we have a huge opportunity to seize the moment, but you have to step into it. And I think about, do you want to be helping lead the change or leading the future or leading the direction? Or do you want to wait to be in a place that you didn't even know where you're going and now you have to react to it?
Could not agree more. I could chat for a lot longer than we have. We are coming up on time. I want to bring you through a lightning round, just some quick hit questions before we wrap up to get a last little bit of goodness out of this conversation. Christy, what's one thing that every HR leader should be doing right now to prepare their workforce better for AI, but that you think maybe some are not doing yet?
You definitely have to build your AI fluency before designing it for others. And I think this is a leader led moment, lead from the front. And don't forget where humans are uniquely positioned to make an impact.
Got it. What do you think is the biggest difference between building AI into products and adopting it internally?
I think internal adoption is cultural. It's not necessarily technical, and cultural changes take longer than building code.
Fair enough. Yes. Humans are more complicated than
Yeah.
even the most complex code, I think, for sure. What is one AI task that you would hand to an agent tomorrow and never think about again?
One of the things that HR actually was spearheading in this organization to get our first AI worker, and it's around T&E. And I will just say to you, I can't tell you how many people have. This is like when you think about moments that matter in the employee life cycle and how many people touch travel and entertainment and like turning in receipts and stuff. It is not a great experience for a lot of people. And when I was thinking about where we could start this, where it would touch most people and it would reduce a pain point and friction point, that's where we're starting. So we're just getting ready to deploy our first AI worker in T&E. I'm really excited about seeing that. But I also go back to the same thing I said to you earlier when we were talking on a related topic, is like synthesizing that information and helping me focus on where next best action is.
Completely. So, last one here. Finish this sentence for me.
Who help organizations change without losing their humanity.
So you might have seen me frantically taking notes as we were talking, because I always try to synthesize like a few takeaways for the audience. So I'm going to try to do that now, and then I'll leave you with the last word. So the first note that I had was really be honest with your teams, right? The ground is moving underneath them and there is change happening. So enroll them into the change, communicate, and then communicate again. And then also listen, right? Creating those valuable forums for hearing their feedback and hearing how they're doing. I said it when you said it, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I love that reframe can go 100 different directions. So I just want to leave it at the tagline and have everyone go think about that on their own and how that can help them. And then the last was step into it as a leader, being ready to step into it as a leader. I wrote down, roll your sleeves up, but you also said, build your AI fluency. Like you're going to have to participate in this shift shift with your teams in order to stay relevant in this next phase. So many great takeaways, but I will leave you with the last word. What is something that you want the HR leader who just listened to us have a chat? What would you want them to think about on their drive home today?
I would just really encourage you to help design the organization of the future. The future is going to happen. And the question is like, are you going to help be the architect or are you going to be on the receiving end of it? I don't think you want to be there.
I get it. Totally step into it, as you said. Thank you so much for joining me. I could have talked for an hour, but won't. And I will share my GPT with you and see if it helps at all. Thanks for coming on today, Christy.
Thanks, Barb.
Thank you for joining us on The Human Element, presented by Whisk. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow The Human Element wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Barb Biden. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.